and welcome to Talking F1. We're a podcast from Grand Prix Grandstand that does more or less what that title says. We talk about F1. More specifically, we talk about Formula All. That means Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and the W-Series. It was the end of F1's first triple header, but for GP Grandstand it was the first triple header of races as both W-Series and F3 joined F1 in Austria. 5 races crammed into 1.5 days made for a busy weekend, so we've got plenty to talk things through, and you'll be hearing us talking F1 about Jamie Chadwick jumping back to the top, the W-Series rookies outdoing some of the second seasoners, Dennis Hauger being addicted to the podium with 3 visits over the weekend, another all-or-nothing weekend for Arthur Leclerc, Norris possibly being the fastest Mercedes-powered car, Russell making the top 10 on Saturday and nearly, agonisingly making it on Sunday. And I'd better let somebody else talk before the stewards penalise me following their weekend. So joining me as ever are Jacob Phillips and Thiemo Albers-Daly. Hello there, Thiemo. A jam-packed weekend. How are you and what did you think of our first 5-race weekend?
It was jam-packed, wasn't it? I mean, it was quite something. I loved it, but I needed a bit of a rest after all of that. To be honest, it was one of those weekends where there wasn't a bad race either. So you couldn't even take a breather for 5 minutes. So great stuff.
Yeah, great stuff indeed. And Jacob, what a weekend for you! Racing coming home to Silverstone next, and football could be coming home as well. How are you? And have you come down from your high yet?
I'm still riding the crest of the wave, to be honest. Obviously, there's a game on Wednesday, but we'll talk football a bit later. But yeah, what an absolutely fantastic weekend. My first sort of triple header covering it. It's exhausting but enjoyable at the same time. And to be honest, thank God for the 2 weeks break before Silverstone.
Yeah, we're gonna need it. And of course, we are covering F1, F2, F3, and the W Series, like I say at the start, all the time. And with the W Series racing, the next 5 events they have, it's going to be another triple header in terms of how we look at this with these weekends with 5 races. So Formula 2 and W Series and Formula 1 next up at Silverstone. And W Series this week wasn't really as action-packed as the first week, Thiemo. Did you still enjoy it though?
No, it was. I think we featured a bit last week, but I think it was kind of the reverse of Formula 1 in a way, because last week it wasn't exactly the most exciting race in the world. And I mean, this week's W Series race was better than that in my opinion. But it was just kind of, it shows you that just at the same track, you definitely don't get the same race twice. But I still had a nice time with it, and there's plenty going on to love about it.
Yeah, there was quite a lot. And I suppose for you, Jacob, you and I are both big Red Bull Ring champions, that we love the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Formula 1 didn't really deliver last week, but W Series did. Thiemo, completely right that it's a bit of a role reversal this weekend. And for you, you're watching W Series for the first time this year, and you probably can now see why everyone talks about Jamie Chadwick after a dominant display.
Yeah, I was kind of a bit surprised last week that she wasn't up there, but obviously she did have that cracked exhaust, and that was very much a 2019 Jamie Chadwick performance, very much, championing her drives from that year, and, putting herself right back into title contention. She's actually leading the championship now, so I certainly wouldn't be surprised if that form continues. And one thing I was quite surprised to learn, actually, I haven't really been following Jamie Chadwick's career too regularly, but what I did find out, she raced for Prima last year in the Formula Regional Series and didn't have the best of seasons. So although she dominated 2019, this is exactly the sort of drive and performance she needs.
Yeah, she did. She was part of the Freck setup for Prima, and it's weird because there are some of the drivers that we see in here that we have seen racing in, well, let's call it mixed gender, but mainly male focus series, and Chadwick didn't exactly set the world on fire with her performances. You're quite right. She did make, I think, the podium once or maybe a few times, but she wasn't going to go and win the championship, which is what you'd want to do. So this is where the question comes, where does W Series sit in the ladder, right? That even if not Chadwick, even if somebody else did win the championship this year, what is next for them if they weren't allowed to return to W Series? What would they do next? Would it be Formula 3? Would it be Formula 2? Would it be Formula Regional? So for Chadwick, that was Formula Regional, but not really a performance good enough to graduate. But we've got a different bit of a setup this year with this academy that they've started, with this teams that kind of mean, I don't really know. But Sidakova, Thiemo, she did brilliantly, making the podium in her second W Series race, up from, was it P6 she qualified up to P5, I think, after the penalties. Terrific racing, and she could be a star for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking when you were talking to Jake there about the Formula Regional. Jim Chadwick, she may not have had the best season last year, but she had that experience with her, and Sidorkova had the same thing with F3 Asia earlier this year. So maybe it's just that extra bit of time in a single seater that gives them both the edge coming into this season. As for Sidorkova's drive, yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. I wasn't necessarily expecting her to get to grips with it so quickly, and to just keep Kimberley at bay quite as well as she did. I was sure that was going to be a case of Alonso and Russell kind of thing, where it's going to happen sooner or later, but you don't want it to. But she just managed to hold her off, and it was great. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I enjoyed the weekend so much. It was just seeing that 3 brand new faces for this year on the podium, and I mean having the top 2 drivers finishing in the fantasy team on GP Grandstand didn't hurt either.
Yes, it's if you don't know, we do have a fantasy league which you can find on gpgrandstand.com/fantasy. So thanks for the plug, Thiemo. And even better, you can start at any time, because we've got a new feature which lets you start the season as if it just started whatever race you join at. So if you were to join right now, you'd be able to see your standings as if everybody started at Silverstone. So partial seasons. And it does have F1, F2, F3, and the W Series, which is fast turning into my catchphrase. Jacob, from your perspective, we saw Kimberley as well, as Thiemo mentioned there, unable to get past Sidorkova and looking a lot faster when she has a front wing attached to her car. She defended terrifically last week without a front wing, and this time much deserved the podium, I thought, and a free place grid penalty to start down P6, but still a podium. She looks very quick.
Yeah, and just basic physics there. Obviously, the car's going to go faster with a front wing, I'd presume. But yeah, fantastic weekend for her. Last weekend, it was a bit shaky, and I thought, at the start of the season that she would be, up there with the title contenders. But it's going to be a topsy-turvy season. We've seen a completely different podium this week to last week, which is what added some spice to the weekend on obviously the same track. But yeah, it was great. And it's also great to see Sidorkova up there as well. Obviously, she's only 18 and just showing that the youngsters can really do it. And it was an impressive drive from both. But I don't think any of them were catching Chadwick, though. She was in a league of her own.
She really was. Just to clarify with those points, that Chadwick had 1 podium in Formula Regional, and completely right as well from Thiemo that we had Sidorkova in F3 Asia, and she didn't really set the world on fire there, but I don't know if that's part of the team.
She did have a wrist injury for part of it, so I think it was her first time in single seats as such, I think. So I think it was just quite a learning curve, but clearly it's gone all right for her. And I think going off what you were saying earlier about where to next, if she continues like this, with the age, you'd think at the very least Formula 3, but Formula 2 could be a real possibility, especially with SMP backing her.
Yeah, the SMP backing is going to be significant, a big help. They've of course put so many drivers into Formula 1, and we've got Smollier at the moment who had a decent weekend again. So yeah, it's a difficult one to know where these drivers will go after W Series. But I said before, I think W Series could be not the drivers we have this season. It could be the drivers we have in 3 or 4 seasons' time that might be the ones that maybe could knock on a Formula 1 seat. But at these youngsters, and that's the difference. Kimberley, of course, has had this kind of second chance, last chance saloon, for want of a better expression. And Powell as well, although she had a bit of a troubled weekend this time because of some issues with her car. These are drivers who aren't going to make it into Formula 1, as blunt as that may sound, but their age is just not on their side, even though they clearly have the speed. They just didn't have the opportunity. The opportunity now is W Series allowing these drivers to be racing. And some of the other rookies we saw Bruno Tomaselli, somebody we've had in the grandstand with this podcast. She did pretty terrific as well. I know Sarah Moore pipped her at the end, and Kimberley herself got her at the start of the race. Abby Eaton went from qualifying in P11 up to P6, and Nerea Marti. Jacob, these are all probably new names for you. Did everybody just look like they should be there from your perspective?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a standout worst performers on the grid. I mean, certainly as we've seen different results from race 1 and race 2, meaning they're all certainly capable. And obviously there were some drivers last year that we mentioned there that weren't performing this week. So there's a whole blood of new talent coming through. It's going to set us up for an exciting season. Shout out to Sarah Moore, actually. Like you say, Jim, I'm still learning a few of these names, and it's going to take me probably a few more races to get up to scratch with knowing the whole grid. But Sarah Moore, certainly P2 last week, fantastic. Bit of a surprise podium and showing a bit of consistency, which is not really a theme in the W Series this year. Obviously, we see drivers last week, sort of Volland was 3rd, 10th this week, but P2 last week, P4 this week. Yeah, really, really consistent drive and really impressed with the majority of the field, to be honest.
Sarah Moore looking like she could be maybe mounting a championship challenge if she's able to just be consistent. You could probably win the championship by sniffing 3rd and 4th places all year round if you have the drivers like Chadwick last week and Alice Powell this week struggling. Big struggles though, Thiemo. Somebody we probably expected to see mounting a championship challenge and pointless so far. Bites Kavissa, that stall on the front row completely scuppered not just a weekend, potentially a championship hopes.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big shock of the weekend for me, because especially considering going back over to refresh my mind of all the 2019 season and enjoying all of that again. You're kind of expecting her to at least be getting a point, but the fact that she's gone 2 rounds out of, 8 rounds total and no points, that's... If Silverstone isn't a win or at the very least a podium, then I don't think she stands. You need something major to happen to everyone else to still stand a chance of being able to fight for the title. So it's very surprising and a bit. And again, it wasn't even anything. The car, it was her that made the mistake, which is rare in itself as well. So it's a shame to see, because you want to see her up there fighting with Jamie Chadwick, and it's everyone else doing it instead.
Yeah, it's a weird one with the car, because we saw several people. It wasn't necessarily a stall; it was just like a stutter or something off the grid, because it did all get
going. We had it in Formula 3 as well with a couple of drivers where they kind of got it a little bit, but then when lights went out again, it just nothing happened. It's a very odd theme for, maybe it's Austria specific.
It always seems like a common theme, doesn't it, in a sort of junior single season? I remember F2 had a few problems a few years ago, didn't they? And whenever I see it, I'm never sure, so I have to always go back and check. Was it a driver error or was it the car? So it's always kind of hard to put a marker on that, really.
It's terrifying stuff for the drivers behind. I think we saw Kyle Collette struggling on the formation lap with something. I don't know if that was him or the car, because then it happened or had a similar issue later on in the race. But yeah,
it's almost worse there because there's 30 cars instead of the 18 in W Series. So it's like, ooh.
Terrifying stuff indeed. And some of the drivers we might have expected to see do well, like Visser, I've got written down here, Koyama, who had a shocking weekend. I think she finished a lap down, and I don't know, because we didn't really see much of it, why that was, but she started well down the order, only ahead of Sabre Cook, who didn't even get a qualifying lap in, but then made up for it a little bit by getting up into P10 before going a bit further down the order. Vicky Piria, who I expected to do much better for the whole season, but she really struggled this time out. Kosha Radest, who is standing in for Tasman Pepper, and you thought maybe she'd want to show, hey, I should be here all season. I should be here on merit. I've not really seen it so far. And Jess Hawkins, who, again, has struggled a little bit. And yeah, this is where, Jacob, you maybe don't have the familiarity of the names if all the names are new to you. I'm looking at these names, like, I recognize these names. These people should be doing better than they are. And might be an off weekend, but it's not looking good for some of these drivers. I don't know, Thiemo, if there's something with the circuit, a new circuit, something with the car, something from not racing last year. What do you think it could be?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's hard to judge in some respects because all the different drivers, because of last year with everything going a bit tits up, it's hard to know how much racing they actually got to do. So maybe it is a bit. So I think it's going to be very telling, I think, in Silverstone, if those same drivers that didn't do too well over both race weekends still have those problems. Because if that is the case, then you know there's a real issue. But if they can bounce back and say Zilokova, Thomas Early, and some of the more front runners have issues there, then maybe it's just getting to grips with things and it's just track specific. But as things stand at the moment, especially people like Koyama and Hawkins, with how they did all right in 2019, but didn't set the world on fire too much either. They kind of can't afford to keep doing this on a consistent basis.
Yeah, Koyama seemed to be not one who qualified too well, but clearly had the ability to overtake.
She always has more race pace, but it's qualifying she always falls down on, which kind of puts her in an Arthur Leclerc situation, which is never ideal. It's fun to watch, but you don't want to be there as a driver.
No, you certainly don't. And we mentioned right at the start, it wasn't as good a race as the first time out, and that might just be for the sheer fact that we didn't have the safety car to bunch things up, which then created, quite a lot of spice towards the end. Jacob, do you think this series is the only one we're following and covering on GP Grandstand? It's the only one that doesn't have DRS. Do you think that would benefit it, or do you actually quite like the purity of this racing?
When it comes to motorsport, I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I love the gravel tracks, for example, and I like fair racing, which we'll get onto, I'm sure, very much later in the podcast. Got a lot to talk about there, but I always say this, and it's one of those. It's like the VAR argument in football, isn't it? Is it good? Is it bad? I think we've seen with how hard it is to pass throughout all the formulas, really, and especially Formula One as well, that it is a necessary evil, and there are very much negatives to it. Obviously, some of the passes on certain tracks become way too easy. You get DRS trains, which leads to a status quo anyway. But I think that this race may be better. We saw loads of gaps that were within sort of around a second, especially beyond Chadwick, sort of around the second to sort of fifth places. But I think it would have benefited certainly from DRS. But it's also great to see when you do get an overtake that it's going to be a legitimate overtake. So there's always a sort of a counter argument to balance out. But I'd say we're at a stage now where we're 10 years into DRS. I think it's certainly like I said, a necessary evil.
Yeah, it's. I really don't know where I sit on it. That when there's a poor race or a race where there could have been some more overtakes, I'm like, yeah, well, God, we need DRS. And then when there's some races where you do have the DRS trains, and I think, well, if they're just following each other like they are anyway, what's kind of the point? But
it feels like one of those things where if you've got designers like Adrian Newey about, you could probably design a car that could overtake on merit without the need for DRS. So it's, unless there's but again, the teams don't really have an incentive to do that at the moment, because why would they if it puts them at a disadvantage overall? So unless there's a regulation change that helps it along, it's going to remain a necessary evil, I think.
A necessary evil indeed, but it wasn't too bad for Formula 3. The DRS trains were there, but my God, it wasn't just a train, was it? It was overtakes galore.
Snake.
Like snake, yes. Thiemo, in your race recap, said it was like snake because the cars were just following each other so closely. And Jacob, I think you found a brand new love for Formula 3 after this weekend.
I mean, I am absolutely in love with Formula 3, Jim. I'm not going to lie to you. The last few years, I've sort of touched base with Formula 3. I was always a massive Formula 2 fan, but I wrote in the debrief, which you can see on GP Grandstand now, that, I think it's the most consistent motorsport we're having in 2021. It's our third round now, and the saddest point for me is we're already halfway through the season, but the action is going to come thick and fast. Obviously, we've got Spa coming up, Budapest, which is going to be, I'd say, just as good. It's great racing at France as well. We don't always see great racing around there, but 3 fantastic races, 3 different winners, and loads of action to talk about. And there's so much to get into. I absolutely love Formula 3.
It was the first time as well in either F2 or F3 where each race was good. You kind of always have that one kind of slow or not too interesting race, but this time F3 just didn't get that memo and just went for it. It was great.
Yeah, the 3 races were all barnstormers, and I was trying to remember what happened in each race, and the only thing that was consistent for me was Dennis Hauger got on the podium because he was there as an ever-present, and the first driver in this new 3 races per weekend format to stand atop the podium every single, or stand on the podium, not on the top step, but stand on the podium every single time, really shows that this guy is surely, Jacob, heading for the championship.
To be fair, I've been fairly confident since Barcelona. If you go back and look at my preview for the season, I did say that Hauger would, or sorry, not the preview for the season, the race debrief from Barcelona. Obviously, Hauger led the championship from there. I said that he'd still likely hold it until we get to Texas. I think now the lead is, what, by my awful maths, nearly 40 points, or maybe a little bit more. And 3 consistent podiums this weekend. I don't think many other drivers are going to do that this season. First, second, and a third this weekend. Absolutely fantastic drive. Pole position to boot as well. I think he was top in practice, but correct me if I'm wrong there. So I certainly can't see anyone catching this year. Absolutely dominant performance all weekend, and I think going to be the worthy champion come October.
One of those things, even if the other drivers do manage to get consistent podiums like that, there's nothing to stop him from doing exactly the same. So it still might not even be enough.
Exactly.
It could be the only thing that stops him is that sort of maybe unreliability or maybe getting hit out of the race. And we did see race one, that very thing happen, which led to his only, I say it like it's a bad thing, but his only victory of the weekend. But from P12, he was marching through the field, and was it, Nannini, Novalak, and Sargent all vying for the win in race one, Thiemo, constantly as well. It was like those three, I thought any of those three could win the race, but Dennis Hauger is just climbing up the timing screens, getting higher and higher, sits back, waits for, I don't know if he necessarily waited for, but he only had to wait for the two coming together ahead of him with Nannini and Novalak, takes a win. Is this sort of stuff we're going to see in Formula 3? Because it's not the first time we've seen the leaders take each other out.
Yeah, it was to touch on Hauger first there. It was something I noticed about him all weekend. He made progress if he wasn't near the top already, but then he didn't rush anything. He took his time with it and chose everything carefully, which I think at times because I think in the second sprint race he could have gone for the win but didn't, and I think part of him restrained himself because he knew solid points was good enough that he didn't have to win the race to still. I think he was thinking long term there, and it was great thinking on his part and great strategy, because that's kind of what you want from a champion, especially if you want to be moving up into Formula 2 next year and beyond. So you want to have that kind of thing there. And again, I think with Novalak and what was it, Nini, you said, yes, I can't keep track of everyone. It was one of the things that it was great to see the battling, but again, I think there's more to gain and more to lose for them at the moment, so they're going to risk it a bit more, and obviously it's not going to always work out brilliantly, and I think Martin's had that bit of that this weekend as well, so it was interesting to see the different thought process going on there. So it's just, but I mean, trying to keep track of it all, don't ask me.
Yeah, I was saying, trying to write some of the notes up before we recorded today, that it kind of merged into one, but that wasn't necessarily a negative.
It's that giant board where you've got all the string and everything, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, going a bit crazy with it. But the thing was, if there were three dull races, I'd be thinking, oh, actually, which of the dull races was this one? But it wasn't. It just felt like there were constant battles throughout the field, and we don't want to big up Hauger constantly, but he was the one driver that was just always up there. We saw Vesti actually have quite a good weekend as well. I think I criticised him last time out, just that.
I think we both did. It clearly works. Tough love.
Tough love,
yeah,
indeed.
All three of us there.
Yeah, well, it seems to work, Jacob, that he's gained his first win of this season, and Schumacher's gained not just his first points of Formula 3 in 2 seasons, but gets it with a win. And I've criticised Schumacher as well for falling down the order. These guys seem to get to the lead and be quite comfortable once they got there. They Vesti's point of view might be in for the second place in the championship battle.
Yeah, well, it's certainly looking that way. We've obviously talked a lot about Hauger. I don't really see anyone catching him, but he's moved up to second with that. Obviously, we also got Martins up there and Duhan as well, who had really poor weekends. So it's going to be about capitalising on those situations where other drivers do crash. Going back to your previous point, I do think it's going to be a theme that does carry out throughout the season. We've seen the leaders come together quite often, actually. And with Hauger having such a lead, I think there's going to be reeks of desperation. We're seeing it with Leclerc, and time and sort of patience is going to be really key here to get the results. But with Hauger with such a lead, drivers are going to have to take these risks. But certainly Vesti, once he got in the lead, certainly showed a mature head there. Although there was absolute chaos going on behind the DRS train, we didn't know who was going to sort of be where. He was never really in doubt once he got the lead. And Schumacher, yeah, it was great to see that name. We're a bit of a fan of nostalgia here at GP Grandstand. It's always great to see the Schumacher name, and I'm really surprised actually. I didn't really know much about David Schumacher coming into it, but I read some reports online saying, he's certainly not going to be the talent that maybe Mick would be, for example, but certainly showing that maybe putting those critics to bed there was a fantastic performance. And yeah, once again, never looking troubled at the front.
Just to play devil's advocate with you there slightly, it was only because of the penalties and then just not having a great first sprint race that gave them the reverse pole in the end. So whilst he still had to stay in first place for the rest of the sprint race, which he managed to do a great job and did a good job with that, you do wonder if he would have got there on merit without the steward's help. Yeah,
the reverse format, I think, has its place, and it certainly gives us these sorts of races. But yeah, I think I'll align more with Jacob on this, that we criticised Schumacher before because he has been at the front and has fallen back. And I think it was the last time out when he finished behind Leclerc, despite starting right at the sharp end. and Leclerc starting at the back. This time it didn't happen. He was at the front and he stayed there. And we messaged over the weekend, and I was unable to watch that race live. And you said your head's going to fall off how crazy this one is. And I was expecting something crazy to happen with Schumacher at the end, because maybe I had this kind of
Barcelona flashbacks.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it wasn't. He was consistently, I think he led start to finish, was never really in doubt. And yeah, fortunate that he...
Credit where it's due, but I think from my perspective, I would just preferred it if he'd been able to get there by himself a little more, because you want to see them succeed like that. So I think that was the only thing that frustrated me.
I completely understand. And I do feel that, yes, you want to see them get there by themselves. And he was very fortunate that he started on pole position after some of those post-race penalties, which we will go into. But at the same time, Leclerc started in pole position from he had to get to 12th place, but in itself, that's not necessarily terrific, because it's still 12th place because of where he started last time out in France. And then we were just like, yeah, and once he was there, he won, and we celebrated it. So I'm very happy for Schumacher. It might not be any more wins from this season, but great to see. I don't know if he's going to follow in his cousin's footsteps or his father's footsteps, but nice to see, like, I'm with Jacob, I see the nostalgia elements of it. Let's talk about Leclerc though for a moment. Another weekend where he either does terrific by overtaking every single car on track, more or less, or doesn't get any points. And is this a sort of difference that we're seeing, Thiemo, between him and his teammate in Hauger, that Hauger is aware of the championship? He's aware that I need to just, like Jacob said, I just need to kind of sit there in second place. I don't need to fight. That's all I need to do. Whereas Leclerc is having to be a bit more desperate because, one, wants to make a name for himself, maybe, and two, he isn't in the championship fight as it currently stands, and he just thinks, okay, might as well go all in.
Yeah, it's a weird one to play. He's a bit like a yo-yo, isn't he? It's his rookie season, obviously, so he wants to make a good impression, and obviously not his fault this, but he's going to always get compared to Charles, so he wants to be able to prove that he is his own man. But at the moment, it's just kind of all over the place. It's great to see him do what he did in the second race and overtake like 21 cars. But again, you think, again, it's weird to even consider that, but is that going to get a little bit boring if he keeps doing that? Because you just kind of want to see him have a solid weekend throughout, where even if he comes, say, 7th or 8th in all 3 races, at least it shows some consistency. Because I think with a team like Prema, obviously Charles was there before he went off into F1. So there's a bit of that at play there. And I think Hauger is very much the championship person in that team. Caldwell's doing a very nice job at the moment, it would seem, of being the number 2 kind of driver if we're going to look at things like that. And Leclerc's just kind of, I'm not sure how to describe it, he's just kind of going all over the place and just getting some other stuff and keeping everyone entertained. So it's a weird one. It's great to watch, but it's just kind of a head scratcher at the same time. So it's question marks.
Head scratcher indeed. Jacob, do you think it's potentially trying to live up to the name? Is it trying to be too eager? He was doing not that bad, actually. He couldn't qualify as great as Hauger, and Hauger just seems to have qualifying wrapped up at this point, but he qualified in 9th. Then he had an issue. I think he ran off the road at turn 4 just by his own accord, which then put him down the order. That's a mistake. And I want to talk about this a little bit as well. He had the mistake trying to overtake Martins in race 3, which resulted in a terrifying crash. But he has the ability to overtake. What's going wrong with this guy's season?
I think it might come back sort of earlier in the season. He's playing a lot of catch-up. Obviously, in Spain, he was very unlucky and suffered punches. What was it, in 2 of the first 2 qualifying sessions of the season? So obviously that puts him on the back foot. And he's certainly following in his brother's footsteps of being, the highlight reel, as I called Charles last week. Very entertaining there in race 2, coming through 21 cars, which proves he's got the talent. He certainly has the racing ability. But one thing I think he doesn't have is the mature head, which Hauger certainly possesses. But, you can't always fault a racing driver. If you see a gap, you've got to go for it, that old adage. But he's certainly got to screw his head on a little bit. And, certainly making so many mistakes, and you've got to say that he's 12th in the championship. For a Prema, that's just really not good enough, to be honest. So he certainly needs to sort of attach his head, and like Thiemo said, I agree very much so. It'd be much better next time out in Budapest if he gets a 7th and 8th and picks up a podium. That will show consistency. He gets some points on the board, and he can build his season from there on in. But yeah, that crash was very, very scary, wasn't it? I think it was good that we never saw the T-bone. That was really scary on board watching that.
He collected, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Novelak. I was going to say, because if Novelak, you did not want to be him this weekend. Poor sod, every single race, you got sympathy for him. It was just, again, no fault of his own in that race. He just got collected.
Yeah,
no points for Novelak this weekend as well.
And he deserved at least a podium. Race one, fighting with Nannini. He seemed to be there or thereabouts, and yeah, bitterly disappointing for him. I did see that the stewards issued a lot of penalties this weekend, which we will go into just momentarily. They did issue Leclerc with a penalty for that incident with Martins, and I thought, when I looked at it, and we didn't see the aftermath once he hit Novelak, thankfully, because I'd have jumped out of my seat. But I did think Martins might have squeezed him a bit too much, potentially. But at the same time, Leclerc could have backed out of the move, but the door was closing. But
I feel like the gap was there, and I think Martins just moved over a bit too. I feel like Martins could have thought about that a bit more for like a second longer and thought, okay, if he gets past me there, he might overshoot. And I can get him on the inside if he goes, because again, you've got to, if he's going that deep into the corner, Martins could easily have pipped him back on the inside going out of turn 4. So I feel like I can understand why they gave Leclerc a penalty in theory, but I feel like Martins then should have got one as well. But I think Martins was just having one of those weekends where he just, again, it's going back to that maturity with Hauger. He just didn't seem to be having that. He seemed to just he's been doing so well recently, and I think he just wants desperately more of that. And it results in weekends like this where it just doesn't go to plan because you're trying to push too hard and prove yourself maybe too much. Whereas, like Jacob was saying before, you just get some solid results. We'll be happy with it. No one's expecting you to go and beat Dennis Hauger, especially with how things are going. So nothing wrong with getting second overall in the championship. I mean, if you look at last year's Formula 3, the top two still made it up into Formula 2. So, we all like to win, but you've got to know when to pick your battles a bit. And for Martins, it didn't really work out that well this weekend.
Jacob, you were nodding a little bit there in agreement that it was a bit of both drivers' fault, do you think?
Yeah, Martins just squeezed him onto the grass, but once Leclerc's over there, I mean, he should have. Like I say, you go for a gap, you see a gap, and Leclerc's a racer, especially like his brother. He's gonna go for it. But once he's on the grass, he T-bones Novelak at the race. Of course, you can't really move out of that position, but he's gonna obviously pick up a penalty, rightfully so. Really, it is a dangerous act, regardless whether he's totally at fault or not. So yeah, I mean, going by the stewards this weekend, breathing on somebody gets you a penalty. So of course, he's going to get a penalty there.
The stewards in F3 issued about half the grid with penalties for various reasons, mainly going wide at the turns 9 and 10 exits. And again, we saw plenty of stewarding penalties in F1, which we'll get onto after this. What did we think of the race results being altered after the race had finished, Jacob?
Well, certainly, Jim, I think that Christmas has come early because the stewards are very, very generous this weekend. So props to them. But yeah, I'm never a fan of knowing the result. And it kind of alters your enjoyment of the race as well. You watch the race unfolding because, that's going to be the result in it. But when you're waiting, some people don't have time to go back, and certainly with a series like F3, there's so much going on in the weekend, be it WSeries and F1 as well, that people just haven't got the time to go on Twitter or whatever else. And you always want to see the result on track, don't you? Not just scrolling through your phone and so was third and is now 15th. And yeah, it kind of changed the whole thing. So yeah, it's not ideal for me. And one year we waited, I think, was it 3 years for a Verstappen victory in Austria to be confirmed after he went round the outside Leclerc at turn 2. So yeah, I'm never a fan of it, to be honest.
Yeah, it was unenjoyable, I think, is the right word when you find out a lot after. And if it wasn't for the world of Twitter and the internet, I guess, you would have to check the newspaper the next day to find out, hold on a second, I'm sure Sargent...
If it was sorted by then.
If it was sorted by then. And we're in an age where, and we messaged over the weekend with this as well, where they've got VAR and you've got Hawkeye and whatever else in other sports. And in the Formula One racing game, if you cut the corner X many times, you just get the instant thing, you've got a penalty now. And once the stewards see this, or once the cars go over the curb, in this instance, it's not over the line, it's over the curb, X amount of times, I don't know why you then have to wait however long to have that confirmed that, oh, that is a problem, but that's not a problem. Surely this stuff can get sorted in the race unless you're in maybe the last 3 or 4 laps. Thiemo, am I being a bit too wanting too much from the sport?
No, I don't think so, to be honest. I think with all the resources the FIA and the stewards have at their disposal, they'd be able to sort it out. I mean, even if it was the case of the last 3 or 4 laps, you could still have it done, delay the podium ceremony if it needs be because of whatever reason for like 5-10 minutes. I'm sure that's not going to make a big difference in the grand scheme of things, just so you can sort it out. Because again, like you say, if they can do it for a video game perfectly, surely they could apply it to. It's the same thing. It's just essentially put the algorithm onto the real thing, and it'd be sorted. So again, if you take F1, Yuki was kept going over the pit lane white line. They noticed that pretty quickly and sorted that all out. So if they can notice that quickly, they can hand out penalties accordingly, so that he keeps having to go into the pits every 5 seconds, so it can serve this 5-second penalty to then go in again to do it again. You'd think that they'd be able to do it across the entire race weekend. So I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning for it is, because again, the amount of computers and money and everything at their disposal, there's, in my opinion, no real excuse for it.
Yeah, some frustrating stuff, and that did carry on, like you said, with Yuki into the Formula One as well. But let's go back to positivity for a moment before we go into the 5-second penalties that were the sprinkling of seasoning into the race. That we've had a triple header, and after Baku, where everything looked a bit frustrating and tire kicking for Max Verstappen, he's had a nigh on perfect 3 races. Jacob, you said last week, I think, in your debrief on F1 that Verstappen's now the title favourite. If you didn't think that last week from anybody listening, anybody watching, they have to now, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it's the tide has completely changed in F1, hasn't it? Obviously, this is 5 wins in a row for Red Bull now. The only other team to do so in the hybrid era, obviously Mercedes have done it several times. But yeah, Max is certainly the favourite now. One thing I will say as a little caveat to that is Silverstone and Budapest coming up. So hold that judgment just, ever so slightly, that obviously is tracks where Hamilton does do really well at. Obviously, the home crowd might play a factor at Silverstone, but certainly going to be the favourite now. And I don't think Mercedes realistically have the pace. They said that they weren't going to bring upgrades, but who can really believe that? Obviously playing the old trickery there. So they will bring a few more upgrades, but obviously a lot of the focus will be on the 2022 cars. So yeah, I think Max Verstappen is certainly the favourite.
I think the other fact to consider there is that traditionally when Lewis has been in the back foot, when they come back to racing after the summer break, it's trouble for whoever's decided to challenge him in that particular year, with only Rosberg having been successful in the entire 7-year history of it so far. So I'd keep an eye on that. So whilst Max might be the favourite for now, I wouldn't rule out Hamilton coming back in mighty fashion. And as you say, Silverstone, Budapest, very strong tracks for Mercedes, and I think it would be good, as weird as it sounds probably due to, for Mercedes to win the next 2 before the summer break, because then it makes things a bit more spicy, because I think we've had this, obviously, the last 7 years, Mercedes go and run away with it. And as enjoyable and as interesting as it is to see Red Bull now putting the show on the other foot, you don't want that to be the case for the rest of the season, because then we've got the same problem again. Then you want to keep it interesting. So I really hope that Mercedes bounce back a bit more, especially the next 2 rounds, because we just want to see some close racing, and we want the kind of stuff that Lewis and Max were doing at Bahrain and Imola, but just as often as we can get it. So more of that, please.
Yeah, Max Verstappen becoming the very thing that he swore to destroy. And I agree, I want to have the championship battle ebb and flow a little bit. Maybe Hamilton takes the lead again, then Verstappen takes the lead. And I really don't care who wins the championship by the end of the season. I just want it to go down to the wire.
I'd like it to be split between if like one driver from one team wins the drivers, but the other team wins the constructors, just for something different.
Yeah, it's been a long time having a single constructor dominating. It's not really a domination by Red Bull at this point. Mercedes started the season a bit stronger, but it's turning a little bit into that, isn't it, with how it's gone of late. This weekend as well, we saw a bit of a difference for Mercedes by the sheer factor that he let Bottas race Hamilton. And Bottas, he wasn't particularly slow. He likes the Red Bull ring. He's won there before. And Jacob, do did you find this call from the team to allow them to race surprising, or was Hamilton, I think he had floor damage in the end. Was that something that you just thought, okay, if they're going to try and salvage second place with fast Lando Norris behind them, they had to do it?
I mean, at face value, it's very surprising. How often have we seen Valtteri being allowed to race Lewis? Not very often. It's not very often that, Valtteri's on Lewis's tail anyway. But I thought, that's weird. Obviously, for the championship, you're going to want to keep Hamilton in that position. But I think that one thing that maybe people didn't consider, loads of people on Twitter saying, well, that's surprising, but Lando Norris is coming at them, absolutely charging there. And I think that they thought about the team game as well. It's a long championship, 23 races. It's only round 9. And I think that if they had let them stay in those positions, then Norris could have got both of them. So I think they're playing the team game there and just getting as many points as they can, getting Valtteri to second, because, Norris, an absolute charge this weekend. And I'm not surprised, but I'm surprised he put it in second. That was quite surprising, although he's having, for me, the drive of the season so far.
Yeah, that Mercedes power really helping Lando go forwards. And Thiemo, I've got the question here. Was he the fastest Mercedes-powered driver this weekend?
Yes, short and sweet, I think. It's just, the fact that even if we just take the race out of the equation for a second, qualifying alone, the fact that he was that close to the Red Bull in not a Mercedes, in a traditional Mercedes, was just astounding. And like Jacob's saying, he's been kind of driver of the year so far, and he just keeps doing better and better. And again, he's equaled the McLaren streak of points in a consistent number of races, which, fingers crossed, he does it again at Silverstone. Means he then takes that record from Fernando from about 20 odd years ago. And it's just, it's great to see, because I think Hamilton obviously signed the new 2-year contract with Mercedes, but I think that's probably the last contract renewal he'll do for Formula One unless something unforeseen happens. So it's great to see Lando kind of picking up his mantle in the sense of being the next great British driver in that sense, because obviously we've got George, but he's kind of an unknown quantity at the moment because we're just kind of eking out what we can get from him. So it's great to see Lando filling those shoes nicely. And again, it just showing how difficult it was for Lewis to pass him. Okay, Lewis had some issues, but at the same time, you still think that's a Mercedes that should still be getting, and a 7-time world champion to boot, should be able to get past little old Norris in his McLaren. So it's great to see it.
The Bottas thing, I think, actually made it more impressive for me. So if Hamilton did have damage on the car, let's take at face value that he did, for his speed to be lacking, if it wasn't for the 5-second penalty that Norris got, second place was on the cards. The only way that Bottas got past, and maybe Bottas could have got past on track, but was in the pits. And that's because Lando had to serve a 5-second penalty. That has really hurt his weekend.
Credit where it's due, and this will probably shock both of you, but I was quite happy with Bottas this weekend because he did a decent. He did quite a decent drive overall. The team strategy worked. He listened to them, and it was one of those things where I think it was Spain or France where Bottas was told to let Lewis past. He wasn't too happy to play ball, and he'd been a kind of bit argy-bargy with them a bit, and it was just nice to see them actually come together and work nicely together. And it work out for both of them for a change. And Bottas, because he was, again, how many times have we heard Bottas needs to quicken the pace, stick with Lewis so he can go past or whatever. And for whatever reason, he just doesn't do it. Whereas this weekend, again, maybe he does like the Red Bull ring. So maybe it was just finally some things coming together or some things just clicked in his brain that he needs to drive a bit better if he wants to keep that seat. But it was a nice change of pace. It was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one.
Bottas 4.0, I think.
4.0. I don't know, Jacob, if you got the same notification I did from the BBC that the hell has frozen over when Thiemo says Bottas is doing all right. Let's move on for the Mercedes and the Mercedes. I include the McLaren Mercedes there. The 5-second penalties. Perez got the same treatment that Lando did. The drivers have called for a bit more leniency when racing, and the stuff that I have, after the fact, learned is that the real letter of the law is it's not what you did, it's more the impact that it has on the person suffering. And that is why Perez and Lando got penalised, because by the letter of the law, they were in the wrong. But at the same time, Perez's race was ruined by it. So yes, I completely see it there. And Lando kind of didn't leave the space, which is Fernando's famous words, you have to leave the space. I don't know where Perez is going to go, though, and I don't know if Lando's meant to jump out of the way. I just thought this was real hard racing. Jacob, you mentioned the traditional tracks, that the gravel trap was there to catch them out. Same thing happened with Leclerc. But ultimately, all the drivers continued going, and it was fascinating to watch. And having the penalties get handed out kind of made me think, are the drivers now going to be a bit more wary to make moves like that? I don't want that to happen, Jacob. How did you see the stewards in Formula One? I know Formula 3 was its own thing, but Formula 1 as well. 5-second penalties everywhere.
Yeah, not very good, to be honest. And it just reeks of inconsistency as well. I mean, if we go to another track, there may or may not be gravel there, but, the stewards change one thing every week, don't they? And that's the problem, I think, with Formula One. They never keep the same driver stewards. The team often changes. So you often get different sort of penalties handed out. Sometimes there'll be a 10-second penalty. Sometimes they no investigation necessary. And it kind of goes against what F1 has sort of been championing in the last couple of years. We saw loads of penalties given out around the sort of, 2016, 2017 seasons. And from about 2018 to 2019, Michael Massey coming in as well, there seemed to be this sort of precedent set that we're sort of allowing more hard and fair racing. And that just goes totally against it for me.
I want this consistency. I want to know what to expect if I see Norris and Perez, or Perez and Leclerc battle like that, and then when the drivers get forced off the track a little bit, I want to know, that's a 5-second penalty or whatever, a drive through, it's nothing, it's a warning. Maybe that's the thing, maybe you do X number of warnings before you get the penalty.
I think the thing was like with the Perez and I think it was Leclerc going into turn 6.
Yeah.
It's like you could see Perez turning the wheel slightly there. I don't know if that was a bit of oversteer or if that was him just deciding to get his elbows out because he's just sick of Leclerc at that point or what. But like that one, I can understand the penalty for, but the other ones, it was just like, it's just racing. You're going to have these kind of situations. So it's 5 seconds. Is a bit.
Yeah, I feel like I could be a bit of an armchair expert when I talk about it. This is how it should be. But it's that level of knowing the sport that I've been watching it for so long that I want to know.
We've not watched this for so long for nothing that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, it's not that. But it's like I've watched it for so long that I want to be able to go, that's what's going to happen. I don't want the inconsistency that, okay, this is now in the hands of the gods. Who knows what could happen? Because it's not a fun bit of unpredictability as much as I love unpredictability in racing.
I think with the thing, it was you weren't surprised that they got the penalty, but you were disappointed that it happened because you still don't want it.
Yeah, I want the drivers to race
on track. Yeah.
Jacob, Russell, Q3, out qualifying a bunch of cars, and then heartbreak 3 laps before the end of the race when old man Alonso comes and steals his point.
Bloody Alonso, how dare he spoil the fun like that? But fantastic weekend for Russell once again. Fantastic qualifying performance first. Williams into Q3 since Italy 2018, and really proving why many believe, and I think the majority of the fan base and paddock believe, he'll be in the Mercedes from next year. Could obviously be announced as early as Silverstone. That would be a nice adage to the weekend there in front of the British crowd. But yeah, fantastic and really unlucky. He was up there on pure pace again. It wasn't just a case of it was more of a qualifying car, but he didn't have the race pace. He certainly had both, and there was no retirements really ahead of him. So yeah, he was up there on pure pace, and it was a great battle to see as well. Obviously, the old hand and Alonso, 2-time champion versus sort of a world champion waiting, if you like, for future years. So it was great to see the battle and the friendship developing there as well. Sort of the master and the student sort of relationship acquiring there, and yeah, it was just great. Obviously, very sad to see once again. That's 2 weeks in a row where he probably would have got points, or certainly should have got points. But it's certainly coming, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's over the next few weekends. What a weekend it will be if he picks up a point in Silverstone. That's all I'm going to say.
Alonso as well saying last night that when he came around the corner to see who was in front of him, who was in 10th, part of him was very sad that he was going to have to fight Russell for it. You just think, even he feels bad for it. He's like, it's a whole other level. I mean, like Jake was saying, the friendship between the two of them is great at the moment. I'm loving the kind of new bromance that we're getting from that one. And I mean, I think you may have seen as well in Park Ferme after the race, them going over to each other and having a little bit of a nice little chat about it. I like the idea of like an old champion, as you say, mentoring the new upcoming champion. It's just if and when Alonso does leave, I kind of hope he joins whichever team Russell's driving for at that point to keep mentoring a little bit and just get a nice sitcom going there with those two.
Yeah, the Russell, he doesn't need to be scoring all the points to show how good he is. I think everybody's well aware
It
of
would
how
be
much.
nice though.
Of course it would. Of course it would be. But no one's going to be surprised if he gets that Mercedes seat now from how well he's done. And yeah, Jacob, you could be right. When we're speaking post Silverstone, we could be speaking about George Russell making it into the Mercedes next year. Conveniently, at the time of Russell's luck, the Mercedes are on the downward trajectory. But who knows with that 2022 car? He could be 2022 world champion. We never know.
It's the awkward thing. Do you want to see him join Mercedes, or do you want to see him stick with Williams and build them right up to the very top?
If Williams were to build the best car for next year, stick with Williams, but you just can't.
You just don't know that, do you?
I've already said it. Latifi world champion. There you go.
It's a big shout. Get to the bookies now.
You thought my Perez prediction was bonkers.
Still
Hey, I think Thiemo's bonkers as well. There's a whole new person in town.
Right, let's go into the top and bottom three guys, and we'll do it quick because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a whole bunch, 18 drivers that we have to go through now with so many races. Thiemo, why don't you take your W Series top three and bottom three if you could?
Top three is quite easy for me. So Jamie Chadwick back on form, Sirakova rookie and driver of the weekend for me in a way, and then Abby Eaton, great to see her bounce back up from a disappointing first week.
Absolutely, was Abby Eaton, wasn't doing too great
in the end.
Yeah, it wasn't doing too great in the first week, and then P6, decent haul of points. How about you, Jacob? Top three W Series.
I've gone for Chadwick. Obviously, I think that's going to be the consistent theme across our top three. Sidrakova as well, fantastic podium in P2 there. And I've gone for Sarah Moore as well, just showing the consistency that a lot of the other drivers haven't shown in W Series this year. Second place last week, fourth this week.
Yeah, I can just say ditto Jacob for that because I've got the exact same three. I did wonder about Kymäläinen because she... from P6 to P3, Visser stalling didn't really help, but she had to do the overtakes to get up there. But then so did Sidakova. So yeah, that's a pretty easy one. And Chadwick, she's going to be looking like championship favourite if she wasn't before, straight back in it. Bottom three from me, Koyama. We spoke about it earlier, a really disappointing one. Same for Piria and Jess Hawkins after last week ruining Chadwick's race, and then this week ruining her own race by just having no pace at all. Thiemo, your bottom three from W Series?
Similar to you, Jim, got Koyama there because again, 2019 pace doesn't seem to be there, unfortunately. Jessica Hawkins as well. It's we know she's got some pace in there, but she just doesn't have the password to unlock it at the moment. And then Visser for me because again, it was kind of last weekend. Maybe I was a bit harsh, but this weekend it was all kind of on her. So Visser.
Yeah, didn't really make her way up the grid after falling a bit further back. Any similar names from you, Jacob?
Yeah, fairly similar names for me here as well. I've gone for Visser, just another bad weekend, obviously stalling on the grid there. I've gone for Koyama as well, who was a lap down. I'm not really sure what the problem was. We discussed that, but yeah, certainly not a good weekend for her. And Hawkins as well, just 16th last week, 16th this week, and yeah, just not really doing a lot there at the back of the grid.
Yeah, I feel bad for saying Visser for you guys, but I understand it. But yeah, P2, she showed that she had the pace, but
I think if she wasn't a championship contender in 2019, we might not be saying it, but I think we expect a lot more. So
yeah, we saw Kymäläinen stall on the grid, I think at Hockenheim the first round last time, and impacted the whole championship because she was further back. So looks like Visser could be falling to a similar fate. Let's go to Formula 3 then. Jacob, can you tell me your top three drivers, please?
Well, this is a little bit harder considering all the action. It's hard to remember all 30 names, and with everything going on this weekend, this is a fairly hard one. But I have chosen, I think you can't really look past Hauger, can you really, to be honest? Fantastic weekend as well. Consistency, 3 podiums. I've gone for Vesti, who's brought himself into title contention, or certainly around the top of the championship there with that fantastic victory, his first of the season. And consistency, which is one thing, probably the word of the day, really. We haven't seen a lot of it across the formulas this weekend, but I've chosen Edgar, actually. 3 points finishes, sort of, talk about what Leclerc should be doing. I think it was a 5th, 7th, and something else. Can't quite remember the other position, but 3 consistent point positions. And I thought, going something a little bit different. Now I've chucked Johnny Edgar in there.
Yeah, I was looking at this myself, and it was 10th place, the final one. He had P6, P5, P10, and yeah, Johnny Edgar hasn't really featured that much when we've been speaking about Formula 3. But yeah, consistent finishes. He's part of the Red Bull family, and I kind of want to see a little bit more from him. But hopefully this can kick on, and solid points, very important. Thiemo, your top three?
Similar to Jacob, Vessi and Hauger, agreed with the reasons for that. I think we've said enough on that one. But then the third one for me is Hauger, because I think again going a little bit left field there. He said himself he's getting more comfortable with the car, and then he got his first point of the year on the second sprint race, I think, on Saturday, which I think it's interesting because I think it's his first season really as well in Formula 3, and I think the thing to make him feel extra good about getting that first point was that it took David Schumacher in 2 seasons and a race win to get his first point, and if he does it the same race in less time, point's a point at the end of the day. You're not going to complain how you get it, so you can say he's at least on par with the Schumacher. Not too bad.
Not too bad indeed. Yeah, Hauger coming in second round and getting a point, so good effort from him. For myself, I really struggled. Hauger's the obvious one, and I feel bad for not including him, but I also wanted to put Ollie Caldwell in there as well. 2 podiums, and might be himself putting a bit of a championship, or maybe P2, depending on how much Hauger dominates. Bit of a challenge himself, finally. He's not had the easiest of seasons so far, but that consistency. Vesti, don't need to say any more about that. Terrific weekend. And I wanted to have a shout out as the final man or person of the weekend with Harry Benjamin, who on the podcast and took to commentary his first ever F3 race that he commentated, and he hadn't commentated anything before this year, and like a duck to water, he was terrific. And we
threw him into the deep end of this weekend, didn't they?
Yeah, the Porsches are one thing, but then you go into the FIA F3 and like a duck to water, he really stood in the big shoes of Alex Jacques to make it feel like he'd been doing it for forever. My bottom 3 of F3, Leclerc, because if you're going to be driving for Prem, you have to be doing better than getting DNFs and struggles like you've had. Colette, maybe a bit harsh, but again, driving for an academy, he really just hasn't stepped up. I know he had the issues in one of the races with the stalling, but not particularly impressive. And Correa as well. And I could have gone for some of the names that we expect to see at the bottom, but Correa didn't really have much of a weekend. I think he had that messy incident, which caused Kalen Frederick to get himself injured as well. So yeah, that's what I'm going for. But I really, really struggled for the F3 bottom 3 this time. How about you, Jacob?
Leclerc, like you've echoed there, in a Prima should be doing a lot better. It was nice to see him, come to the field with 21 overtakes, but another messy weekend, a dangerous crash, and obviously making that mistake into the gravel that ruined his own race. I've gone for Colette as well. Obviously, would have been on pole, wouldn't he, if it wasn't for the track limit infringement, and he just had a messy weekend, a few incidents as well. And I've looked through all the penalties, and I found out that Philip Ugran got the most track limit violations. I think it was a combined 45-second penalty he got over the weekend. So yeah, Philip Ugran, you are my third driver.
Almost a lap.
That's some good researching there. Yeah, half a lap. Yeah, good research there, Jacob, to get that. So based in fact rather than emotion, unlike myself. How about you, Thiemo?
I found it tricky as well for the bottom 3, but I think Van der Helm's on the list because he had a bit of a messy weekend there. Stanek, because I expected a bit better from him, considering what he's been doing so far in the season. And then Martins for me, because it was just missing that maturity that he's been having a bit and just going for broke a bit too hard, and he needs to just calm down a little bit, I think. So maybe I'll be a bit harsh there, but maybe we'll do him some good.
He's certainly going to be listening to your words, Tim. I'm sure he's waiting to hear
it.
it.
Everyone does, Jim.
Yeah, I understand the Van der Helm one, though. I think it's him and Sargent that ended up having a bit of a collision at 1.2, a bit messy again. And yeah, let's whiz through the Formula 1 ones because I'm sure everyone will know the reasons why. For me, I've gone for my top 3 of Verstappen, Norris and Sainz. Sainz made a whole bunch of places up from his Q2 struggles. How about you, Jacob? F1 top 3?
I'm going to say Verstappen, no words needed. Norris, no words needed. And Russell, no words needed.
Easy enough. I like that. Whiz through that. Thiemo?
Norris, again, no words needed. George Russell, because... and then the big shock for you, Bottas.
Wow, that is a big shocker. Bottas ahead of Verstappen. And how about your...
hero?
0 to hero. But maybe Verstappen's gone from hero to 0 with getting a Grand Slam. Is he in your bottom 3?
Oh no, I'm not that mean. He did a great job. I just didn't want to fit in with the pattern of you two. So, no, for the bottom 3, I've gone for Yuki just because how many times can you make the same damn mistake? on that bloody pit lane entry line. Latifi, because in comparison to Russell, it just is nowhere. And then the stewards just need a slap.
Need a slap indeed. Jacob, yourself, your bottom three.
Latifi echoing exactly the same points as Thiemo there, just miles off his teammate. Mazepin as well for getting the same penalty that Latifi got, was it? Speeding under the yellows there. And I'm going to actually say Ocon again. I'm sorry, Ocon, but you've really not impressed me since your contract extension. Fernando's certainly taking the lead in that team.
Yeah, Ocon's a tough one. Difficult, the only retirement, but he shouldn't be in the position he's in to be getting hit and sandwiched. So create your own luck a little bit. I get Latifi in my bottom three as well for similar reasons that you guys said, as well as Perez. I think despite him falling down the order, some of those penalties you talk about, Tsunoda doing the same thing twice, having those penalties he had, that's a bit rough. And then Kimi Räikkönen, because that issue, that crash with Vettel at the end, what the hell was Kimi up to there? That was embarrassing.
That was a racing incident, leave it out.
Just like it was concentrating. I was a bit appalled from you there, Kimi. So bottom three, Perez, Räikkönen and Latifi. But apart from that, let's wrap things up because we've got Silverstone to think about next. So until the next time, where can people find your work, Thiemo?
You can find me here, of course, on GP Grandstand, and then for my other work, you can see me on Drive Tribe and YouTube. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, do feel free to at t.albers.daily.drivetribe.
And Jacob?
I think I'm going to need a little sleep before Silverstone, but you can find me on GP Grandstand, of course, and Jacob Phil 18 on Twitter. Yeah,
it's that time of year, isn't it? You've got the Euros on, Silverstone on, and Wimbledon on. It's that British
and the Olympics are coming soon as well.
It's crazy, crazy times. As for me, you can find my writing on gpgrandstand.com and fortlot.com for my F1 satire news show. Search the F1 week that was on YouTube, and of course, I'm on the Grand Prix Grandstand TV YouTube channel and on the Talking F1 podcast we can hear at the start of every week. You can find all the links for all of us in the show notes below or the YouTube description if you're watching our lovely faces. Thank you for listening to us talk about F1. Keep your ears peeled for the next episode where you can hear us talking F1 once again.